So, you've all heard the news by now that Prince Harry's visa is now at threat at being released. And so I've brought on your favourite DC lawyer, John Witherspoon, who was actually at the hearing to give us an eyewitness account and more information as to what happened that the mainstream media is just not telling you. Hey up everyone, it's me, Stef The Alter Nerd, your nerdy alternative, and welcome to the Dose of the Daily Nerd, where I break down the royal news and gossip of the day that's pretty much caught me eye. And oh my goodness, yes, I had to bring in your favourite DC lawyer for this one, John Witherspoon, because he was actually there at the hearing to hear out what's been going on in the latest saga for Prince Harry's visa fight, the fight for Prince Harry's visa, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, without further ado, John, thank you so much for jumping on for this one. Take it away. What did you witness? What was said? What's not being reported in mainstream media? And what's your takeaway from all of this?
Well, Steph, good to be with you, and thanks for having me on. It was very interesting. Just to recap very, very briefly, the reason this hearing was held today was that Judge Nichols ruled on the case for the release of Harry's visa information. There was a Freedom of Information Act request that was denied by Department of Homeland Security. Heritage Foundation then sued the Department of Homeland Security and said, "You have messed this up. We think it should be released." There was a court case about a hearing about a year ago in front of Judge Nichols. He made a ruling on that. And basically what he said was, I'm not going to release Prince Harry's visa. He did not find that there was sufficient public interest in seeing the visa application. And so he said, I'm going to keep that private. The problem was that when he made that ruling, he redacted, meaning he blocked out so much of his opinion that it basically became impossible for Heritage Foundation to say, we don't agree with what you said, because it's impossible for them to see what was said. And the problem is the judge felt that if he allowed the full text of his opinion to be made available, that it would basically give away the status of Prince Harry's visa. So it's a very complicated, very interesting question of law, and that's why Heritage Foundation and Homeland Security were back in the courtroom today in front of Judge Nichols to basically have Heritage Foundation explain why they think they should be able to see more of the judge's ruling, and for Homeland Security to say, these are the reasons why we think you should not unredact and reveal everything that was in your opinion. So what ended up happening was the judge asked both sides to give him some additional information, and I'm assuming that he will want that information very quickly, as in probably within the next week or so. And then he said he would reconsider based on the information that each side provides, and then he will come up with another ruling, which I think the general consensus is that that would probably take 3 or 4 weeks. So we're talking about maybe the end of February, early March, or the middle part of March, assuming everything goes smoothly. There's no guarantee of that, but that was really the sort of general takeaway from the hearing today. There was not a ruling today. There was not a decision today. It's just the judge saying, you know what, I will go back and take another look at this. I want both of your teams to give me some additional information so that I can make a further decision going forward before this gets turned over to the Court of Appeals, which presumably it will at some point, provided Judge Nichols doesn't completely release the contents of Harry's file.
Now, when I reported it as breaking news on this channel, I went through a little bit of what Judge Carl Nichols had said as per what mainstream media are quoting him at. And I'm taking it as he's now looking at a middle ground. He's now looking at this option of actually releasing this thing, but doing it in a way that balances two aspects: Prince Harry's privacy and the expectation and the need and the right for the American people to know the truth as to how this whole visa situation was handled in the first place. And he's gone to the Department of Homeland Security and said, right, okay, I'm looking at releasing this now. Send me your redactions and I'll consider what I'm going to release and what I'm not going to release. And the DHS lawyer turns around and says, yeah, I can send you redactions, but you're going to be left with an empty shell. Now,
Yes.
that's my interpretation of what Judge Carl Nichols has said, as per what is being quoted in mainstream media. Now, you were there at the hearing. You heard it all. Before we started filming this video, you said you took away a different or slightly different interpretation. What do you make as to what's being decided or where the judge is going with this?
Well, yeah, that's right. And I don't feel like that what's likely to happen, the judge is not going to make the whole thing public, because I don't think he would want to basically reverse himself to that degree that it would totally satisfy heritage. I think what he's going to probably do is be just a little bit more precise in the areas that he has redacted according to what DHS says is really important for them in terms of what gets redacted. And also then Heritage is probably going to say, well, we think we need to know X, Y, and Z. And if it's in your opinion, then we want to see that. So it's a little bit of a tug of war. I really don't think that this is going to be resolved in the near term as far as Harry's visa status is concerned. Just because Judge Nichols, I don't think, is likely to totally reverse himself in a way that's going to be satisfactory for Heritage Foundation. I think at the end of the day, they're going to want to know more information than Judge Nichols is going to be willing to unredact. I think it's going to end up in the Court of Appeals at some point, and it'll just depend how quickly the system manages to process the submissions from both sides at this point, and then how quickly Heritage Foundation wants to move ahead with an appeal to the Court of Appeals.
Okay, and so how long do you think it'll take for the next hearing to take place for us to potentially find out the result of this all, the conclusion to this long saga that's been going on for a number of years now?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And the reason is this. If it goes to the appeals court, that's going to drag it out for at least 6 months, if not longer, because they're going to have to be oral arguments again, probably. It'll have to be on the appellate court docket, and it could be dragged out substantially. The interesting thing, though, is that during the press gaggle, which was held down in the lobby of the courthouse after people left the courtroom, I asked some questions of Niall Gardner. He is the figure, the public face of Heritage Foundation, and I said to him, what would happen if somebody came along and refiled this whole issue, this Freedom of Information Act request? What if somebody came along and refiled that? Would that make any difference in the publication of Harry's visa information? And he said no, because you would probably get the same answer from the same low-level people who processed this request the first time around. And that's the request that was being litigated today. However, I also asked him about whether the change in administration from the Biden administration to the Trump administration could have any impact on this. And he said, yes, absolutely. He said that at any moment in time, by which he meant, as early as tomorrow morning, the general counsel for the Department of Homeland Security could say, we have a different perspective on this than the previous administration did. We do think that this is publicly important information, and we're going to just release Prince Harry's file. So this case could run its course through the court system, or at any moment, Homeland Security could basically say, you know what, we've changed our mind on this and we're going to release this information. That could make things really, really interesting. So, my takeaway from those comments that Niall Gardner made and that his attorney, Samuel Dewey, made down in the lobby of the courthouse, if I were Prince Harry, that would be a very scary prospect to me because that, like I said, could mean that at any given moment, the legal counsel and the Department of Homeland Security and in the State Department could basically say, you know what, we're tired of this. We want it to go away. We have a different perspective than our predecessors did on this. And we're going to make it go away because we're just going to release it. And then that will eliminate the need for the legal case to go forward.
And that was part one of my exclusive interview with your favourite DC lawyer, John Witherspoon. Stay tuned for part two as we go deeper into his interview with Niall Gardner. For example, how is Donald Trump actually going to get involved? And are British politicians going to try and force the US government to release Prince Harry's application? There is so much more to know. So find out more in part two that'll be coming up very shortly.